Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming back to my YouTube channel. My name is Lydia. I am your money mentor online and I am a financial literacy advocate. So today what I want to talk about is one thing that bothers me about us human beings and how we handle money. And the topic today is, if only we could leave our money alone. If only we could leave our money alone. And what that means, what I want to talk about today is just how, if we were to leave our money alone, especially in savings or in investments, how it would grow by comparison as to when we keep taking it. So let's dig into that today. So as I mentioned, if we leave our money alone in certain places, it does better than in others. So for example, let's look at cash. If we leave our money alone in cash and in a high yielding savings account, how will that be affected by inflation? I'll tell you. Generally, inflation will eat into those savings and it will cost us. Basically, the value of the money will decrease due to inflation. For example, if we put £100 in a savings account today and a year later, we look at how much that £100 will be worth, it will probably only be able to buy £97 worth of the money that we're talking about. So for example, what I'm saying is the money decreases in value, probably about £3 in a year, based on inflation today. So my encouragement to you is that you need to understand the fact that there is no growth taking place if you leave your money in an account just by itself. If it's high yielding and it has a high interest rate, that might be great, but at the moment our interest rates are not that high. So that leaves us in a place where the money decreases in value instead of increases. So that's when you put your money in cash. So for example, like I said, in a savings account, that amount of money is only insured up until £85,000 in the UK. And what that means is if you have £100,000 in there, it will only insure you up until £85,000. Everything else would be lost if the bank closes. If, for example, you have a joint account, that on the other hand will insure you for up to £170,000. Okay? Anything above that amount in a savings account in a bank that closes, unfortunately, you will lose the rest of your money. So there are good things about savings accounts, like the fact that they may be fairly high yielding. However, there are risks to saving your money in a savings account, and I just need to point those out. Now, the third area, if we choose to leave our money alone in stocks, for example, this kind of makes me a little happier because with stocks, you have a chance of growth. Okay, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen. There's no guarantee when it comes to investments. However, should you put your money in stocks or shares, for example, the benefit here is that there is a potential for growth if you select those stocks carefully. Now, in the UK, for example, you can do a stocks and shares ISA. Great. You will potentially be able to grow your money. However, stocks go up and down, and it's important that we bear that in mind. But if you leave your stocks for the long term, say about 5 years, for example, there is potential for growth there. What kind of growth? Well, the stock market typically returns about 7 to 10%. Okay, that is how much growth you're likely to see, which is great. However, that is an average over the long term. So this is why I try to differentiate between trading and investing. Trading is for today or for tomorrow, whereas investing is for the long term. So if you take your money, you put them in the stocks, you leave them there, they could potentially grow between 7 to 10% if the market is not tanking. We have seen that in the past, but if you leave your money in there, there's a good chance that it will come back and grow. Now, for example, if you were to look at 2008, 2009 and how the market's trends at that time, that was a challenging time. So people's 401ks in the US unfortunately turned down and became, 201ks because they lost so much money. But that is not the standard. We tend to have a crash every so often. But the good thing is, if you're investing for the long term, you are likely to be able to benefit by that 7 to 10%. Government bonds are also a good place to put money. Now, their returns tend to be a little bit lower, but it's worth looking at because that is money where you are literally lending to the best person ever, right? If you're lending to the government, they will pay you back. I've never heard of bonds being written off. So, and I may be wrong, but I would definitely look into this if I were you. And this is everywhere. Most governments will borrow from people who are willing to invest in them. So government bonds are always a good place to invest. However, there's a good chance that your return may not be as high as the stock market. So the risks here with putting your money away for the long term and leaving your money alone, the only risk here is that sometimes your investments may not return the way you had hoped. So it's important to diversify as best as you can or focus on what you're good at. So for example, I like property. That's what I enjoy doing. I will put my energy into property in that situation. However, if you could understand the stocks and shares and the market's better, definitely dig into that and leave your money there so that it can grow. The fourth area that I want to encourage us to leave our money alone is our retirement accounts. So in the UK, for example, you cannot touch a retirement account until you're 55 anyway. So if you've been saving money in that retirement account and 55 comes around and you're not ready to retire, please leave it there, because I promise you it will grow. Why? I'm talking about your standard pension in the UK. For example, if I put in, say, £245 a month for my pension, what tends to happen is my employer gives me back 70% on that. That's about £183. And then the government gives me an additional £61 on that pension amount. So where I was putting in just £245, I end up getting £490 when I combine what the government is giving me and what my employer is giving me on top of it. So if I were to leave that running for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years or so, imagine how that would grow if every single month my £245 turned into £490. Guys, this is exciting. Pay attention to this, and if you have a retirement account, this is where we want to leave the money again. Leave it, let it sit there. Leave the money alone, people, and watch and see how it will grow. Okay, so that is a great option as well. Post 55, let the money sit there unless you actually want to retire early, okay? And if you want to retire early, just make sure that you've done your calculations to ensure that what you have in that retirement account is going to be able to sustain you for the rest of your life. I will do another video, by the way, for people who are over the age of 40 who have not started a retirement account. So I want to be able to show you how you can catch up and put money aside for your future, even if you haven't started saving at the age of 40. So watch out for that video coming up in a few weeks. How does the money grow in a retirement account? It's by compounding, right? And we've talked about that before and how compounding works. But the general concept of compounding is that your money multiplies on your money. So it keeps growing. Instead of adding to your money, what you're seeing over time is that that money will compound and grow. And if you leave it long enough, friends, if you leave it long enough, you will see the benefit of that investment. So the focus here is to understand that we must try to leave our money alone. But when we leave it alone, don't just leave it as cash. The goal here is to ensure that we leave it somewhere where it can grow. Okay? We don't want to blow our money, we want to grow our money. So if you're able to do that, it's great. Now bear in mind, if you don't do that, if you don't leave your money alone so it can grow, there are certain things that can happen. We may have missed opportunities. We'll have missed opportunities by leaving our money idle. This, unfortunately, is a really big thing. We leave the money idle in a bank account. The bank is not going to let that money sit there. The bank will invest that money for their own returns. So it's super important that we learn to do these little things ourselves. Find out how you can invest that money if it's grown. If you're at 55 and you want to take that money out, you certainly can, but make sure you put it somewhere where you can grow it. Put it into property, put it into stocks, put it into shares. Don't leave your money idle when you're leaving it alone. The other thing that we need to pay attention to is the fact that there can be economic changes if we leave our money as cash. So, for example, easing, quantitative easing was massive. It tends to be something that the US government can do, which means that they release more money into the economy, okay? They print more money. And what that means for you, the saver, is that if you're not taking the opportunity to grow your money, what could happen is that with those economic changes, the value of your money decreases. So let's take the time to understand the fact that if we leave our money alone, we need to leave it somewhere where it can grow rather than where it can decline and where inflation can inflict it. So the key takeaways from our video today are that yes, we want to make sure that we put our money somewhere where it can grow and somewhere where it will develop and increase in value, okay? However, we want to make sure that if we're putting money into a savings account, we don't put more than the savings account can insure, right? And also, if we're having it in cash, we need to understand that it will be impacted by inflation over the coming years. On top of that, another takeaway is that savings definitely grow, but they don't necessarily keep up with inflation. Our place is to make sure that once we have saved a certain amount, we take that money and we invest it. Investments definitely offer growth potential, but there are some risks. Our place is to understand what those risks are before we make those investments. There's no point making an investment that you don't understand. So I always say this, if you can explain your investment to a 10-year-old and they understand what that means, then you're on a good path because you understand it enough to be able to communicate that information to someone else. However, if you have an investment that you cannot explain, we need to question that, and you need to do better to be of understanding, okay, to get a better understanding. Last but not least, if you want your money to work for you, make sure you put it somewhere where it can grow. Make sure you invest in something that you know and understand, and just make sure that you have your eye on your investments, because they can go up and they can go down. Bear in mind, there are a few things that you need to take into consideration. You need to make sure that you invest at the level of risk tolerance that you are comfortable with. For example, I know some people who would always be happy to invest their money in a savings account because they're afraid of losing it in the stock market. And if that's your risk tolerance, if that's the level that you're at, that is okay. But you want to bear in mind the fact that with little risk, you can have little reward. And with greater risk, there's a good chance you could lose it, but you could also have potentially greater reward as well. But invest according to your risk tolerance, invest according to your understanding, and last but not least, invest with a time horizon that is good for you. All right, guys, so I hope this helps somebody. It's a lot of information, but I would encourage you to do a couple of things. Put any questions and comments that you have below in the comment section. I'd be happy to answer those. Secondly, I want to encourage you as well to dig into this kind of information. And if you have more questions, put them in the comments and I'll address them in future videos. Last but not least, please take a look at our website. You'll see it here below. If you have any questions, make sure you ask them or sign up for our newsletter as well, and we'd be happy to respond. And I asked 3 things of you before I go. Quite simple, really. Like this video, share it, and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you on the next one.